Hello and welcome to the second video in our Causal for Finance series. If you're an early stage startup or small business using QuickBooks or Xero, then this series is for you. We'll be showing you how to set up and automate all of your core financial reporting, planning, and budgeting processes in Causal. In the last video, we set up a custom P&L connected directly to your accounting system with some high-level forecasts. In this video, we'll be pulling data from your HR system to build a detailed headcount model for all of your current employees and their costs, as well as all of your planned hires and their costs. We'll be linking this model back to the P&L so that these granular forecasts are used when we're calculating our cash and runway for the future. For this video, you'll need access to your Causal account, as well as admin access to your HR system like Bamboo or Gusto, or you can use Google Sheets as the data source as well. Let's dive in. Just as we used the Causal P&L wizard to generate our P&L from our accounting data, we're going to be using the headcount wizard to plug into our HR system and generate our initial headcount model. Once your wizard is run, you should end up with something that looks a bit like this. What I'm going to do is walk through the different pieces of this headcount model and how it works, and then together we're going to be making some changes to add extra calculations and modify some of the assumptions. So first of all, we have the charts that are attached to this model here on the right-hand side. We have a chart that shows us our total payroll costs broken out by the different departments. I've got 3 departments here. We have headcount broken out by each department, so the total number of employees in each department, and then a couple of tables showing some summaries and a list of all of our employees. We're just going to hide the charts for now, so I'm going to click on the charts button in the top right just to give us a little bit more space. Now, you're already familiar with the spreadsheet. We have a bunch of the inputs here in the input section. We're then doing some calculations in the calculation section, and finally we have kind of the key outputs in the output section. On the left-hand side, you'll see that we have a list of categories that are being pulled into this model. And now we're going to have a separate video all about categories and how they work, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you click through each of these categories, you'll see that Causal is pulling in a list of all of our employees. It's pulling in a list of all the job titles, departments, and so on. And so this model is based on this list of employees, and all the calculations that we're going to be walking through in a sec are done individually for each employee, based on their own salaries, their own start dates, and so on. And then they're eventually rolled up into the different departments and into sort of overall totals. We'll close this employee list now just by hitting the X button, but we can always bring it back up from the sidebar. Let's dive into the actual calculations of the model and how it's working. In the input section, we have the key inputs of the model. So we have annual salaries for each employee. You can expand and collapse that. And you can see in the data column that this is pulling these annual salary numbers directly from our headcount data. We have start dates and end dates for each employee. Again, you can expand and collapse those just to verify. And these are also being pulled in from data. And then we have a couple of assumptions that are not coming from our data source, but we've just entered these into Causal directly, and we can customize these. So the key assumption that we're making in this model is that 12% of an employee's salary is going to taxes and overheads. We've just hard-coded this 12%. You can change that if you'd like. And as we'll see in a sec, we're using this 12% to calculate the total headcount cost on top of the salaries for each employee. We also have an assumption around the currency conversion rate. So if you have employees in multiple currencies, what this will do is let you set a conversion rate to combine all of those into a single currency, typically USD. So these are all the inputs. We haven't gotten to any formulas yet. If we now move on to the calculation section, we'll see that we start to have some formulas that are doing the calculations for this model. What I'm going to do is just expand the formula column so we can see the formulas fully and walk through each of these one by one. So for our annual salary in USD, what we're doing here is we're taking the annual salary in the local currency and we're multiplying it by the FX rate. So this formula is taking whatever numbers were here in this local currency variable, and it's multiplying those numbers by the correct FX rate based on which currency the employee is in. And based on that, it's giving us an annual salary number for each employee that is going to be in USD, regardless of whether that employee is actually being paid in a different currency. And so if you do have employees in multiple currencies, this will be a very valuable calculation. If you don't, then this will be less important, but we can just leave it in there. Now, one thing to call out is that in this formula, Causal understands the relationship between employees and currencies. If we open up the employee list over here and we scroll across, we can see that each employee has been assigned to a currency, and this is coming from the data. And so in Excel, you might be used to doing things like VLOOKUPs or SUMIFs and things like this. In Causal, any of that lookup type functionality pretty much just works out of the box. And so over here, we just have a single formula that's doing this currency conversion across all of our employees. So that's the annual salary calculation. The headcount calculation is a little bit more complicated. If we think about what we want to do to work out the headcount of our company, we want to look at each employee's start date and end date. And if we are currently after the employee's start date, so if the employee has already started, and we are before the employee's end date, so the employee hasn't left the company yet, then we have that employee in the company and they should contribute to our headcount. And if we are either before their start date or after their end date, then that employee is not with the company and we don't want them to contribute to our headcount. And so the way we've done this in Causal is using a simple if statement. We've said that if the date, so this refers to the sort of current date, or the date at each point in time in our model. If the date is greater than or equal to the start date, this is the start date variable from the inputs, and the date is less than or equal to the end date, which is in the inputs, or the end date is blank, so the employee doesn't have an end date yet. If all these things are true, then the employee is currently employed at the company and they should contribute to the headcount. And so we say then 1, and so it'll be a 1 if the person is with us. And if they're not with us, then it'll be a 0. And so this will be a set of 1s and 0s for each employee. And if we expand this out, and if we scroll across here, we should be able to see a bunch of 1s and 0s based on when people are starting and ending their employment. In this case, just because of the time range of the model, these are all 1s, but you should see some 1s and 0s in there based on your own start dates and end dates. So that's how we're calculating headcount. The salary calculation is very simple. We're taking the headcount, we're multiplying it by the annual salary divided by 12 to get the monthly salary. And so really what's going on here is the headcount for each employee will either be a 1 or a 0. If the headcount is a 0, then the whole thing is going to be a 0, and so their salaries aren't being added into the calculation. If the headcount is a 1, i.e. we have that employee currently employed, then it's going to be equal to the annual salary divided by 12. And so this salaries will be a 0 if we don't have that employee, and so this variable will only work out salaries where someone is actively employed at the company. So that's the salaries calculation. And finally, the taxes and overheads is very simple. All we're doing here is we're taking the salaries that we've just calculated, you'll see the little green arrow there, and we're multiplying it by the taxes and overhead input in the input section. So that's 12% right now. And for each employee, that is now calculating the taxes and overheads based on that 12% of their salary. So those are the key calculations in this model. Finally, in the output section, what we're doing is we are aggregating a few of these things. So the first thing that we're doing is we are looking at our headcount, and instead of grouping it by employees, so if we expand this out, we'll be able to see a list of all the employees. You'll see that we have 20 in total. Instead of seeing it at the employee level, what we're doing is we're seeing it at the department level. So if you expand this out, you're not going to see a list of all the employees, you'll just see a list of your departments. And the way this is done in the formula is by referencing the headcount variable. So we're not writing the whole if statement again, we're just referencing the existing headcount variable. And if you click on the middle section of this variable tag in the formula, you'll see all of the different things that you could be grouping this by. So the default grouping is by employee. And we can see that there. And then we have title, we have department, status, currency. And so in this case, all we've done is we've gone on department and clicked on group by there. Obviously the wizard has generated this, but that is what it is doing behind the scenes. And so if you wanted to do a different group by, you'd be able to go here, maybe go on title and click on group by. And if you hit enter, you should now see that if we expand this out, instead of the departments, we have the different titles there. I'll just undo that change. The total payroll cost is very simple. We're just taking the monthly salaries and adding the taxes and overheads. Again, we've already done these calculations. We're just summing them up. And then finally, for the total payroll cost by department, we're doing a similar kind of grouping calculation where we're taking the total payroll cost, which is at the employee level, and we're grouping it by department. So those are all of the calculations in this model. Fairly straightforward. Maybe this if statement is the only thing that you really need to wrap your head around, but everything else just kind of works. And we don't have to do any lookups in order to understand, which department employees are in and so on. Causal handles all of that for us behind the scenes. Now, this is a list that just includes all of our current employees. We probably also have some people that we're planning to hire, and we want to take their costs into account as we do our forecasts. And so what we can do to add planned hires is just open up the employee table via the sidebar on the left. We can scroll down to the bottom and we can add new hires as items here. And so we can create a new item for example, our software engineer number 1. We can give them a title. We can create a new title for software engineer for them. They're our first software engineer. We can give them a salary that we're expecting, maybe 120K. A start date, maybe this will be, let's say next month. And they're pending in this case. We won't set an end date, and they will be in USD. And so we've added a new employee here into this list. We'll also just go through and map the title into a department for this employee. And so if we click on title over here and click on view category, here we'll see that software engineer is now part of the list. It doesn't have a data icon next to it, so it's not coming from our data source. We've just entered it into our hiring plan, and we can assign this person to a department. In this case, we'll assign them to operations. Now, if we go back into our model, what we can do is expand out any of these variables. If we expand out salaries, we'll see that software engineer number 1 is now being accounted for. And if we minimize the formula column for a sec, you'll see that it's 0 until next month, December 2023. And then we start paying them since that's when they join. And then it's 10,000 per month. And so we haven't had to change any formulas. All of your planned hires you can just add to the bottom of this list in exactly the same way, and they're automatically going to flow into your forecasts, and they'll automatically be accounted for in your charts and tables. We can see that in Q4 of this year we go from 20 to 21 people, and all of the other tables will account for that as well. So what we've done so far is we've set up a headcount model from our data source, and we've added some planned hires into the model for our forecast. Let's now connect this up to our P&L that we've already generated so that these granular forecasts are being accounted for when we're looking at our cash and our runway. The first thing we need to do to connect this to our P&L model is to actually link the two models together. You'll see on the left-hand side, we have a section for linked models. If you click the plus button here, you'll see all of the models in your account, or you can even create new models from this section. In this case, we're just going to want to link this to our existing financial model. So I'll just click on that financial model. You'll see that's now part of this linked models section. And so now these two models are linked together. Now, what this means is that if we go into our financial model, in the formulas of this model, we can actually reference anything from other linked models. And so right now, for example, for our payroll and benefits calculation, the way we're doing the forecast is we're taking the previous month's payroll and benefits, and we're increasing it by this growth rate. Now, this is a pretty high level way to do this forecast, but actually now we have a much more detailed forecast available from this other headcount model. So let's go into the formula for payroll and benefits. Let's delete the current formula, and let's now type in total payroll. Now, when I do that, you'll see that it comes up with a list of linked models that have something relevant for us here. And so if I click on headcount and hiring plan here, I'll now see all of the different variables in that model that match the name that I've just entered. And in this case, we have total payroll cost and we have total payroll cost by department. If we just click here on total payroll cost, you'll see that this will show up in blue in the formula. So this is telling us that this is being referenced from another model. And if we now hit enter, what this will do is pull in the correct total payroll cost numbers for each month from our headcount model. And so we should see these numbers now flowing through. And you can verify that this is working correctly. For Jan 2024, it's giving us 160K or thereabouts. And if we go into our headcount model and find the total payroll cost for Jan 2024, you'll see that it is matching that with 160K. So these two models are now linked. Any changes that we make into our headcount model, if we add new hires, if we change assumptions, that'll automatically flow through into our P&L, and everything will be kept up to date. So we've now linked the two models together. Let's dive back into the headcount model and make a couple of more changes just to help you understand how the model is working. The first thing we're going to do is actually a new calculation. Suppose that you want to give out bonuses to employees at the end of each year. How might we do that? Well, we'd have to make some kind of assumption around the amount of bonus that each employee is getting. And so in our input section, we can create a variable for our bonus amount. And in the formula for this would probably be, relative to their salary. The higher someone's salary is, the more the bonus they'll be getting at the end of the year. And so maybe we want to give bonuses that are 5% of an employee's salary. And so we'll say that the bonus amount is 5%. This is now an input in the input section. We'll now do a calculation in the calculation section. So this will be bonuses. And suppose that we want to pay this bonus out every December. It's the holiday season, people are going home for the holidays, and we want to give people a bonus to enjoy themselves. So how might we do this? Well, we can use a similar if statement as we used previously. And so we can say something like this. We can say if the month, so we have a helper variable for month. So if month equals 12, so if the month is December, then we want to give out the bonuses. And in order to calculate the bonus, we'll take the annual salary in USD and we'll multiply it by the bonus amount. So if it's December, then the bonuses should be equal to the salary times the bonus amount. And if it's not December, then the bonus should be equal to 0. So we only want to give out bonuses in December. If we now hit enter, we should see some calculations going on. And you'll see from the sparkline, the sort of trend chart here, that this is mostly 0, and then it has a couple of spikes at a few different points. And if we scroll across to see some of these numbers, you'll see that these are always 0 unless it's December, in which case we have the bonus coming in. And so it looks like that calculation is being done correctly. So we now have our bonuses. Finally, what we need to do is just take that into account in our total payroll cost. And so if we go into the formula for total payroll cost, we've got the salaries, we've got the taxes and overheads. We'll just add on the bonuses as well, and this will flow through automatically. So now we'll see the little spike in all of these calculations. We don't need to make any changes to the downstream calculations. They will automatically use the bonus. We don't need to change our P&L. That's automatically going to be using these latest numbers. So that's how easy it is to make little amendments and add new things to your headcount model in Causal. So we've got our headcount model connected to our data. We've added some planned hires in there. We've added some bonus calculations, and we've flowed this all through into our P&L. The final thing we're going to do in this video is compare a couple of different hiring scenarios to understand how hiring different numbers of people at different points in time will affect our cash and our runway. Causal has a scenarios feature to make this really easy. So we're going to go up to the scenarios button here at the top, and we can create a new scenario. We can call this scenario maybe aggressive hiring, and hit enter. We're now inside this aggressive hiring scenario. Within this scenario, any changes that we make will only be applied to this scenario. We don't need to worry about accidentally breaking the kind of main assumptions of our model. And so from this scenario, we can go into that employee list and we can add a couple new hires. Maybe we'll have another software engineer, they'll have the same salary. Maybe they'll also start next month, and they'll be pending. They won't have an end date yet, and they'll be in USD. And so since this is the aggressive hiring scenario, maybe we'll add a couple more as well. So software engineer number 3, not 10K. That might be tricky to hire them with, but maybe 120K. And so we can go through and add new employees into this scenario. You'll see that the new additions that we're making are being highlighted here. So we can see in green, this is being highlighted since it's new in this scenario. You'll see that in the spreadsheet, we have this sort of light blue highlight, which is telling us that within this scenario, some of these calculations have changed. And you'll see that everything else downstream has been affected as well. So we've created this aggressive hiring scenario. We've made a couple of changes. It's telling us how many changes we've made. And, if we were in this model, the charts and the tables would also include that scenario as well. Now, what we're interested in is seeing how this affects our P&L. And so if we exit this scenario and we go into our financial model from the left-hand side, you'll see that the scenario has shown up here as well. And so the scenario is shared across all of these linked models. And we can go into the aggressive hiring scenario here, and then we can see what the numbers look like for different things. Similarly for charts and tables, on our runway and cash KPIs chart, we can see both those scenarios side by side to understand the effect that this will have on our cash and on our runway. If you want to add scenarios to a chart directly, just click this edit icon in the top right of the chart, and then you can decide which scenarios you want to show. So in this case, we might want to show the default scenario and the aggressive hiring scenario. And so now we can see both of those side by side on the chart. So that's it for this video. What we've done is we've set up a headcount model connected to our data. We've flowed it through to our P&L. We've added some calculations. We've added some planned hires and even created a new scenario that is all connected to the rest of our financial model. See you in the next video.